Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I used to say I hope you're keeping warm, but I hope you're keeping cool. This heat wave, fantastic. Anyways, this is one of the last two videos I'm going to do for you guys. I hope you've enjoyed them as much as I have. I mean, it's not the same virtual and everything, but hey, we did the best we could. So the second to last topic I want to talk to you guys about is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and I think it's a very important topic to talk about. It's an awful thing. It's called Holocaust denial. And unfortunately, in our world, there are a bunch of people who, because of racism or political views, believe that the Holocaust never happened. And in fact, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews was a lie. So some of the most famous Holocaust deniers in the world, in fact, we're ashamed to say it, but two of the leading Holocaust deniers were Canadian. Although Ernst Zundel was born in Germany, he spent the majority of his life in Canada, and he became an avid Holocaust denier, publishing books like Did 6 Million Really Die? And another book called The Hitler We Loved and Why. In 1993-94, he tried to get Schindler's List ban, claiming it was hate speech. He also claimed that the Nazis came up with a UFO secret weapon program. At his trial to be deported, he used the evidence of one Frederick Leutte. Frederick Leutte had actually been an expert on death. He was actually employed by a number of prisons in the United States to improve their killing methods. Leutte's other full-time job was Holocaust denial. He actually traveled to Auschwitz to do what he called was a scientific study on the gas chambers. It was anything but scientific. And Leutte basically chipped off pieces, which you're not allowed to do, chipped off pieces of the gas chamber and brought them back in his suitcase. Leutte has always maintained that there was not enough Zyklon B to kill humans, and that in fact the Zyklon B was used for delousing, for getting rid of lice. What Leutte failed to realize was that it takes 20 times the amount of Zyklon B to kill lice than humans. Moreover, this so-called study has been debunked by all reputable scientists. And then there was a guy called James Keekstra, and James Keekstra was a school teacher, just like me, in Alberta, and he taught grade 10 history, just like I do. And in grade 10 history, you're introduced to the Holocaust, so many of you for the first time. Well, he taught it that the Holocaust was a Jewish invention to get sympathy, and that Jews were, well, I'll read it to you, and this comes from page 27 in your textbook, they are subversive, sadistic, money-loving, power-hungry, and child killers. He taught his students this. If his students did not reproduce those teachings on an exam or essays, their marks would suffer. Can you imagine? Now, he was fired, but just the existence of these people should be maddening to you. Now, as of the late 90s, the birth of the internet meant the birth of thousands of more Holocaust deniers. And this is a serious, serious thing. Sometimes now you will go online and you will hear something that just doesn't sit right with you. I hope you question it. Today, the debate continues to rage. Even Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, has weighed in and got into trouble for his comments about policing anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. I had a student, a former student, who graduated years ago, come back to talk to me. I was happy to talk to him. He was a good guy in school, and he said, I've come across some things I want to discuss with you. I said, of course, discuss anything you want. He said, I think we've got it wrong about Adolf Hitler. And I said, we do? He said, yes, I've been doing some research, and it really comes out that he was more of a civil rights leader. And of course, we had to sit down at that point of the conversation. And I said, where did you get this? What books are you reading? No books, sir, just the internet. And we had a long talk about the internet and about how people use the internet to sell their political opinions. And those political opinions are very controversial, and they have no place because they constitute hate. And he was very good. He was very receptive. I hope that we had set him on the path to true scholarship, and that is that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, and that to deny it is a crime, especially in this country. The most famous Holocaust denier, his name is David Irving. Now, David Irving was in fact a very reputable historian. He sold thousands of books in the 1970s on World War II. Irving has long maintained that the Holocaust is a commercial term and that it's grossly exaggerated. Although he will always evade that question, I've got a YouTube clip I want you to watch about him. But in fact, he was a Holocaust denier in his scholarship. He believed that Hitler really didn't know what was going on, that the Jews, it wasn't a Holocaust, that the gas chambers weren't functional, and that Hitler was kept, as he says, out of the loop, and that it was the people under him that were doing violence to the Jews. What makes him so important is that for a time, he was allowed to put the Holocaust on trial. You see, Deborah Lipstadt was a brilliant, brilliant historian out of Atlanta, Georgia. She had written a book that discredited David Irving's assumptions. Well, he sued her. So they went to court. And in England, she had to prove, she and her legal team had to prove that he had willfully misinformed the public in his works on the Holocaust. I mean, it was, can you imagine? The Holocaust was on trial. He made ridiculous assertions. One of them being that the gas chambers were actually bomb shelters for the SS. But of course, the lawyers argued, why would you put the bomb shelters so far away from the SS barracks? And it was facts like this, because they put history on trial, and history prevailed. He was completely destroyed in court. He lost the case, and, well, it was a victory against Holocaust deniers everywhere. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to leave you with two things. And the first thing is a real story that happened just a couple of years ago. And it involves what is known now as the accountant of Auschwitz. His name is Oskar Gruning. And he's been on documentaries because he worked at Auschwitz-Birkenau. He was handling the money that coming out of Jewish prisoners and going to Berlin. And so he was a part of this SS squad. Although he did not participate in the killings, he was there. Now, he kept a quiet life most of his life, but he went to this bar, and at this bar was someone who was saying the Holocaust never happened. So he stood up and he said, listen, buddy, I was there. What you're saying is ridiculous. And his outspoken nature got him into trouble. In fact, before he recently died, he was put on trial. And so while he was on trial, there was a woman who was a witness who came forward and actually gave him a hug and forgave him. And her name was Ava Kor. She happened to be one of the twins that Joseph Mengele had experimented on. It was a very powerful moment. Both have since passed, but I think it is a very good lesson on Holocaust remembrance and Holocaust denial. So the second thing I'd like to ask you, to tell you about, is that in your life, you probably will come across somebody like this. Could be someone in your family, could be a friend of a friend, someone who denies the Holocaust, say it's a gross exaggeration. I ask you to challenge them, to stand up and say, buddy, I've seen the history, and you don't know it. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a very wonderful day. Remember, don't worry, don't panic, study hard, and be well.